The Ukrainian army destroyed a powerful weapon belonging to the Russians on the battlefield. This weapon is a North Korean-made 180mm self-propelled howitzer, model M1989/M1991 Koksan. This howitzer, which has powerful destructive capabilities, was being used by the Russians on the battlefield to strike Ukrainian-held areas with devastating force. The Ukrainian military first worked to locate the howitzer. Once its position was confirmed, it was destroyed using the American-made
HIMARS multiple rocket launcher system.
In a statement, the Ukrainian military stated, "As a result of the defeat, a secondary explosion occurred in the ammunition. The artillery unit was completely destroyed, and 6 soldiers from the crew were neutralized." Unmanned systems. Forces fighters destroyed a North Korean M1989 Koksan-wheeled artillery unit, along with its crew of 6 Russian soldiers. This was reported on Thursday, July 31st, by the 14th Separate Brigade of the SBS. The Russian Koksan-mounted motorized artillery unit from North Korea was detected by the Crimean Group's aerial reconnaissance and targeted with HIMARS Morse fire. This news caused a shock in the Kremlin. The M1989/M1991 Koksan was one of the military weapons, ammunition, and combat-ready weapons sent in large quantities from North Korea to Russia. The Ukrainian army immediately located the howitzer's position through intensive research and destroyed it with the HIMARS rocket system without delay. The army released a video of the successful combat operation. According to the footage, the invaders attempted to hide their artillery positions among the trees. It was noted that Ukrainian defenders did not specify the direction in which the incident occurred. The M1978 Koksan is a North Korean self-propelled artillery system about which very little is known. The Koksan self-propelled artillery system is a North Korean-made self-propelled artillery system equipped with a 170mm gun. Its firing range is between 40 and 60 kilometers, making it the longest-range artillery system in the Korean People's Army. This self-propelled artillery system has a significantly longer firing range than all currently used guns in Russia. The name and designation, Koksan, were given by the U.S. military because the system was first discovered in the city of Koksan, North Korea, in 1978. The howitzer is believed to have been developed based on German 170mm and Japanese 150mm guns captured by the Soviet Union after the war. The system was first displayed in 1985 and has 2 known versions, M1987 and M1989. The M1989 is currently in use by Russia. Koksans were first spotted in Russia in October 2024, and the first confirmed destruction of the system occurred on February 18, 2025. This is one of the few confirmed hits on such equipment. The occupiers killed a total of 115 people and injured 112 others last week. Among the 35 destroyed artillery pieces were a Koksan-mounted motorized howitzer, 2 2S-19 EMSTA-S systems, and 2 EGS systems. 2 armored personnel carriers were destroyed, along with 11 other vehicles. In the Kharkiv region, FPV unmanned aerial vehicles affiliated with the 3rd Assault Division continue to skillfully destroy the occupiers' armored vehicles, proving that no unmanned aerial vehicle defense system can withstand a well-targeted attack. Now we will examine how Ukrainian drones are destroying Russian tanks on the battlefield. Throughout the ongoing conflict, the tactics employed on the front lines have continuously evolved. However, one particular tool has fundamentally altered the nature of the war: unmanned aerial systems. The Ukrainian army began using these systems not only for reconnaissance, but also as a direct attack weapon with high destructive capabilities. Over time, the experience gained enabled this technology to be used more effectively and lethally on the front lines. Drones are no longer just eyes in the sky, but have become precise solutions that locate and destroy targets. Russian tanks, which were initially able to advance using classic tactics, began to face serious difficulties over time. Thanks to the instant image transmission provided by drones, these heavily armored vehicles could no longer move unseen as they once did. Any tank attempting to move undetected found itself exposed to this threat from above. Tanks were no longer vulnerable only from the front, but also from the sky. As the impact of drone systems on the battlefield grew, the risk level for Russian tanks increased exponentially. Especially when armored units were on the move, attacks by Ukrainian drones resulted in the destruction of many tanks. Whether moving or stationary, hidden or exposed, no tank could escape a well-targeted drone attack. Drone operators gained not only the ability to attack, but also patience over time. The attention paid to ideal timing, precise targeting, and assessing environmental factors significantly increased the rate at which tanks were destroyed. Many operations were recorded second by drone cameras. These images not only showed the destruction of a tank, but also demonstrated how modern warfare was changing. Despite their heavy armor, tanks were now vulnerable. Drones proved themselves not only as a firepower, but also as a psychological pressure tool on the battlefield. Every unmanned system that took to the sky represented a potential threat, and often an inevitable end for Russian tank units. The classic formations of armored units lost their meaning with the widespread use of drones. Tanks, which were primarily designed to counter ground threats, proved inadequate against attacks from above. The fact that a system gliding silently from the sky could render a tank weighing tons useless in a single strike completely altered the balance on the battlefield. Ukrainian drones no longer merely identified targets. They analyzed them, pinpointed their weak points, and directed attacks precisely where they would be most effective. Tanks often became immobilized before they even understood what was happening, then exploded and were rendered unusable. This technological superiority was at the heart of many operational successes that forced Russian armored units to retreat or halt their advance. The inadequacy of traditional defense systems against these attacks further solidified Ukraine's strategic superiority. Every tank that moved on the battlefield became a target. Drones' ability to detect and lock onto moving armored vehicles within seconds reduced tank crews' maneuverability to nearly zero. At times, tanks retreated to forested areas to hide, while others attempted to remain invisible by taking advantage of the terrain. However, these efforts were often futile from an aerial perspective. Ukrainian drones surveyed these hiding tanks from high altitudes, patiently tracked them, and launched attacks at the most opportune moments. These attacks were not one-off incidents. Most operations involved multiple drones working in coordination, ensuring the target could not escape. No matter how fast the tanks moved, they could no longer evade a drone hovering in the sky. One of the biggest changes on the battlefield was the shift from planning for a single target to planning for multiple targets simultaneously. Ukraine's unmanned systems had reached the capability to track, identify, and lock onto all armored vehicles in a specific area at the same time. This marked a major turning point on the front lines. While the destruction of a single tank was once considered a success, such attacks were now being carried out on a much larger scale, with multiple tanks being targeted and neutralized in a short period of time. Drone operators were carefully monitoring every movement on the front lines, analyzing the formations of the tanks, and predetermining the order of attack. All details, such as which tank to target first, which one to target next, and the time intervals between attacks, were pre-planned and executed. As a result, the tank crews often had no chance to escape or defend themselves. In some attacks, while the first drone destroyed its target, the second drone struck another tank at the same time, and the third drone blocked vehicles attempting to move. The fact that drones played an active role not only during the attack, but also before and after it elevated them beyond the role of a conventional attack weapon. Ukrainian forces first observed the target area for a long time, determined the tank's routes, and mapped the most suitable points. This process was carried out completely silently and carefully. When the tanks moved, the drones recorded this movement, analyzed the most frequently used roads and rest areas. Then, the timing of the attack was determined, and the systems directed to the planned location eliminated the targets within minutes. Even after the attack, the process did not end. Remaining vehicles, support units, or possible evacuation attempts were monitored, new targets were identified, and attacks continued. This was much more than a classic attack. Drones were now part of a system that was constantly on alert, constantly monitoring, and striking when necessary. This method caused not only the tanks to collapse, but also the entire armored formation that supported them. Tank units were no longer just a fighting force, but targets constantly trying to escape. Russian armored units tried to develop different defense methods over time. Some tanks were fitted with additional protection systems, some were covered with nets while moving, or various camouflage techniques were used. However, these solutions were insufficient against the speed and precision of drone attacks. Ukrainian drones not only located the target, but also analyzed the protective layers to identify the weakest point. Attacks were typically directed at these weak points, rendering the protective systems ineffective. While some tanks attempted to detect the attack beforehand, it was often too late. Drones were silent, fast, and often launched attacks undetected by the naked eye. This rendered defensive reflexes ineffective in most cases. Each new attack increased the panic on the battlefield. As the morale of the armored units declined, their mobility became increasingly limited. When tanks were forced to advance despite the risk of attack, they often embarked on a journey that ended in loss. As the operations progressed, many tanks were abandoned by their crews before they were hit in combat. The drone's surveillance process was so long and uninterrupted that some tank crews were forced to flee before the attack even took place. The number of tanks abandoned on the battlefield continued to rise. The images captured by the drones, showing tanks with their engines still running, but their turrets empty, clearly demonstrated the intensity of the pressure. The psychological advantage created by unmanned systems began to have a more lasting impact than physical destruction. Over time, this situation changed not only the tanks, but also the tactical understanding guiding them. Tank units were no longer deployed on the front lines, but were instead held in rear areas. This led to a decline in offensive capability, reduced maneuverability, and the complete transfer of initiative to Ukrainian forces. Open, burned out, or empty tanks began to appear on the battlefield. Every target detected by drones faced an inevitable fate. This outcome was one of the most significant developments that disrupted the balance on the battlefield and led to a significant loss of effectiveness for tank units. Ukraine's tank countering operations using unmanned aerial systems have been part of a silent but profound revolution since the beginning of the war. This revolution was not shaped by loud clashes, but by silent strikes from above, eliminating targets in a matter of seconds. Increasing experience over time, expanding technical capabilities, and carefully executed planning have made these systems one of the most critical elements of the war. Tanks have long been regarded as the symbol of modern warfare, the ultimate representation of power and progress. However, this symbol now stands defenseless against another technology. What happened on the battlefield showed that power is not just made of steel, but that a bird's-eye view can change everything. Unmanned systems have become not just observers, but a will that instantly assesses the enemy, analyzes their weaknesses, and determines the outcome with a single shot. During this process, hundreds of tanks were destroyed, dozens were abandoned, and some were unable to advance at all. Ukrainian drones established a systematic approach that involved scanning the area before an attack, calculating all variables around the target, and then striking with absolute determination. This approach shifted the balance not only on the front lines, but across the entire war. Russian tanks gradually ceased to be a threat on the battlefield and became targets themselves. Every move they made was tracked, every stopping point noted, and their most vulnerable moments were awaited. This placed them not only under physical, but also psychological siege. Driving a tank was no longer an act of courage, but a silent march toward an inevitable end. These images were not merely military achievements, but also demonstrated how technology, when combined with human will, could transform into an effective defense. The strategy developed by Ukraine shaped not only the sky, but also the future of war. The results achieved through the use of drones made it necessary to rethink traditional concepts of warfare. Every strike, every hit, every tank destroyed was a step in this transformation. Every explosion reflected in the images was not just the end of a vehicle, it was a sign of change in the methods of war. And today, we can clearly see the impact of these silent but determined moves. Tanks came to a halt, roads were cut off, and strategies collapsed. However, the sky did not stop. Ukraine's unmanned systems are steadfastly maintaining the advantage they built throughout the war. And with each new operation, they are quietly but clearly redrawing the course of the war. What are your thoughts on this matter? We would appreciate it if you could share your opinions in the comments section. Thank you for following us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like our content to stay updated and support us.